Welcome to ACCA SBL Strategic Business Leader. Strategy is one of the important topics in the SBL exam. So when I teach this topic to my students as a starting point, I always say to them that strategy is not a to-do list, but strategy is to think about how to win your competitor or to achieve your goal or objective. Now, the difference between these two would be, think about a student that's sitting the ACCA exam. Now, if a student treats the ACCA study just to be a to-do list, that student will simply say that today I will need to cover the chapter 1, tomorrow will be the chapter 2. Now, if I cover the chapter 1, if I'm happy with the chapter 1 but not happy with the chapter 2, perhaps I may not be well preparing for the chapter 3 onwards because I lose confidence. And that's something that student hasn't treated the study using a strategic mindset. Because for students that using a strategic mindset rather than treating this as a to-do list, that students would simply say, okay, so even if I'm not happy with the chapter 3, but my final objective would be to gain a pass in the ACCA exam. So this is why I will need to think about what's going to be examined by the ACCA, what's not going to be examined or less likely to be examined by ACCA by studying the past exam papers, and then we will need to adjust our tactics, which means our strategy, in order to win the pass. So this is what I mean by the strategic mindset. Now, this is a very important mindset for any given businesses and even for you to have in your exam. So this is why when I talk about strategy, I always say to them the strategy involves these 3 stages. So firstly is what I mean by the analysis. Now, the analysis means that we need to plan ahead of what is going on. And then after we analyse our current positions, for example, I'm not very good at taxation, I'm very good at IFRS, for example, the SBL paper, okay, I will need to make my choice of what to do. Now, the choice that you've made, okay, is just to be on a piece of paper. But you will need to then implement it, so we will need to care about the implementation stage as the final stage though. But let's talk about the stage number 1, when you analyze your position, and that's where the problem may come in. Now, when I talk about the analysis of your position, I always say to my students that you will need to do these 2 things. Firstly, you will need to audit your position, and that's very important. Now, what do I mean by audit your position? Is to check what you are currently good at and what you are not good at currently. Usually, we use something called the SWOT analysis, which means we'll need to analyze the strength of our business and what we are not currently good at, which means the weakness of the business, and the opportunities that we may be facing. That will be very important. And even the threat, so our profit may be reduced. For example, the new competitor may be coming to my industry. Right, so after we've done with the position audit, the next things that we need to think about is our corporate strategy. Now, corporate strategy means that within the group, usually for a large business, we'll need to think about how the board and headquarters will add value. To the business. So think about it in this way. If you're sitting the ACCA exam, for example, if you're studying the ACCA exam, so some of the students may be getting funds from their parents. So how their parents can help. Of course, some of the parents may simply give fund to the student. Okay, you sit the ACCA exam, you decide to choose which tuition provider to study this paper for, and I pay for your exam fee. So everything, leave it to you. Alternatively, some of the parents may have been a qualified accountant. If you're sitting the ACCA exam, no worries, and the parents will teach you using the hands-on approach, okay, step by step. Now, how does the parents, which means the board and the headquarter, will add value, which means will help the business? So we'll need to think about that in a second. But firstly, let's look at the SWOT analysis in much more detail. I will always say to my students that SWOT analysis, S and W, we are talking about the internal bit within the business, and the OT, opportunities and threats, we are talking about the external environments that we are facing. And of course, when we are talking about the internal bit, the first things that we always need to bear that in mind is to think about what you are currently good at and what you're not currently good at, which means the S and W, strength and weakness. Now, I'll always think about the issue such as this. The stage number one, I will always need to think about the resource that I currently own. So usually within the business, we own our staff, we own money, we own machinery and even raw materials. And then we will need to think about the competency issues. And that's important. I would rather define the competency as just to be one skill. Now, think about in my industry, here for APC, we are the tuition provider teaching ACCA qualifications. Now, our resource will certainly be our study material, and our tutor will be our resources. What about our competency? Now, use our tutor, use this study material, I can teach SBL paper, and this is what I mean by the competency, which means I've got the skill in teaching this paper only. Now, can you survive in this market? I would say that the education market, for example, for the ACCA field, will be quite competitive. It's relatively hard for you to own the resource plus one competency to continuously succeed in this market. Because I always see that new competitor emerging in our market, and even ACCA is consolidating a market by not giving many opportunities nowadays to tuition providers. So if that's the case then, in order to survive in this market, you will need a combination of the resource and competencies, which means not just limited to one competency, but you're not only good at teaching the SBL paper, but at the same time you are good at marketing your business. You're even good at developing the tailored solution to your customers, which means to your students, and using the high-tech platform and to make sure that they enjoy your course and even that they can pass the exam. So if you've got all these resources plus many competencies, we call it as the strategic capability. And that's very, very important. But you may say that not just here for global APC, that teaching the ACCA exams, because I can find many other tuition providers will provide similar course structure and materials and content to global APC. So if that's the case then, I would say that the strategic capabilities that I mentioned before would just to be the threshold strategic capability. It's just to be the minimum entry level strategic capabilities that we need to think about that. We can survive in this market, but can we win our competitor? You will need to have something unique. So for example, we are very good at explaining things in very simple English, so you can further understand it and to apply our standardized steps to save you time in the exam. So if that's the case, then okay, this may be our unique strategic capability. Now, we are talking about it's like the process as a starting point. You need to have that strategic capability so you can deal with the changes happening in your industry. And of course, the final result would be, if you've got strategic capability, it will be quite unique. You can win your competitors, which means you are very good at something better than your competitor. So if that's the case, then that could be your competitive advantage, and that would be the result. Competitive advantage is what I mean by the result. It's your advantage to win your competitors. Right. Now, in the SBL exam, when we are analyzing when we have competitive advantage, which means, yes, we finally won our competitor. So if this is the case, then using what models that we can analyze this? Well, in the SBL exam, we will use the Porter's value chain analysis to look at this. I would say that very complicated model, but the idea will be quite straightforward. Because the idea behind the Porter's value chain, is that any given business, we can use the value chains to analyze what it currently has inside the business. Because, for example, here for Global APC, we provide the online courses for ACCA students. So, of course, the starting point should be, we've got the study materials, we've got a tutor, and then we record these videos into a product and sell it to the customer using a marketing campaign. And we also provide the after-sales service, for example, the tutor support. And of course, all these activities, we need funds to do that. We need humans to do that. So this is the whole picture of the Porter's value chain. Nothing very complicated. But the complicated part, I will touch that in a second. The complicated part for the Porter's value chain analysis will certainly be, how can you assess each of the activity will be adding value to the customer, which means the customer likes it. At the same time, you can manage this business quite well. So, for example, you need to have the strategic planning in place in making sure that you've got funds initially before you can finally record these videos. Because when recording these videos, we'll need to record them in a studio. We need to rent that space, we need to pay the rental fee, and of course, I will need to pay the editor's fee to edit these videos. So this is the idea about the Porter's value chain. And of course, after we look at the Porter's value chain, the next thing we need to think about is that we will need to think about the network, which means the value network, which means we will need to think about whether or not we should work further with our supplier. So, for example, we may be outsourcing our activities to the supplier. We may even forming into a strategic alliance relationship with a supplier, for example, using the joint venture agreement. For example, me and the supplier may be setting up a new business and to carry out some research about the latest raw material that could be used subsequently in our product development. And of course, we will need to also think about how to treat our customer, or whether or not we should further work with our customer to capture their value to our business. So these are sort of ideas that we will need to think about later on. Very interesting idea, really. But of course, a very interesting part in your SBL syllabus is that for the competitive advantage, we'll also need to think about whether or not the competitive advantage can be sustainable in the future, which means lasting forever. And of course, to do this, we've got a specific model in your syllabus called VRIN model to do that. The second question is that how can we achieve the competitive advantage, or how can we sustain the competitive advantage? Okay, So that would be another idea. Let's talk about that. Now, when we are talking about the competitive advantage, we are talking about the end result of a strategic capability. You can continuously win your competitor because you've got the resources and the unique competencies, and of course, forming into the strategic capabilities. Now, the next thing is, yes, there are two types of questions. Firstly, whether or not is sustainable into the future. Of course, in your ACCA syllabus, we've got the VRIN model to look at. So think about ACCA. Quite familiar with that, really. Do you think ACCA is quite good compared to other competitors, for example, the local CPAs and so on? I would say that probably the answer is maybe yes. But the reason is, using the VRIN model, I can analyze the ACCA positions such as this. Firstly, ACCA really provides value to a lot of students and members. And this will be quite valuable, really. So, for example, ACCA provides lots of benefits. For example, the members network to our members. Secondly, rarity. I would say that ACCA is truly a global professional qualification, and quite a few professional qualifications in accountancy can be compared with ACCA. The ones that I can think about may be ICAW. Okay, so if that's the case, then I can win, which means ACCA can win. Thirdly, inimitability. Whether or not ACCA can be eliminated by others? Well, that's a good question. But according to history, for more than 100 years, that could be a bit hard for others to copy ACCA. Finally, we are talking about the non-substitutability. So we are talking about whether or not the ACCA can be substituted by others. I would say that ACCA is truly a global passport, which means that if you've got that ACCA qualification, you can work anywhere, okay, globally. So it's non-substitutable by others. So if that's the case, I would say that ACCA's strategy and its business is quite sustainable. Its competitive advantage is quite sustainable in some way. Well, the second question I will need to ask you is that how to sustain the competitive advantage. Well, to answer this question, you can use one of these three strategies to sustain your competitive advantage. Firstly, you can think about the price, which means being the cost leader in this market, which means that you can possibly, like Coca-Cola, and to spread your fixed costs over the number of bottles of Coca-Cola that you produce, which means that the economies of scale. Being a cost leader, your cost is so low because your fixed cost will be quite low per product, you can set up a low selling price as a result. Secondly, you can think about the differentiation strategy, which means that you can differentiate your product, such as Apple, providing a good product process, for example, such as global APC. So if you pay for the course, you can get access to it instantly. The process is quite smooth and on time. Alternatively, you can even think about the service to be differentiated. For example, think about the 5-star hotel, trying to differentiate yourself from others. The third aspect for that will be to think about the lock-in strategies. Now, what do I mean by lock-in strategies? Will be this. Well, just to think about whether or not I can become the first mover into this industry. And then our aim is to become the industry standard. So everyone needs to follow that. An example for this would be the Microsoft. Okay, enter into the software industry, and nowadays every computer very likely is to be installed with the Microsoft system. Okay, and becoming the industry standard, of course, because lock-in strategies, locking in many customers in the first place. Now, when I analyze the strength and weakness, of course, I can think about whether or not I've got competitive advantage. I will need to answer two questions. Firstly, how to sustain the competitive advantage, and whether or not our existing competitive advantage is sustainable. And of course, very importantly, later on, I would like to use the Porter's value chain in more detail. No worries for that whatsoever. Let's move on. Now, when we are talking about the position audit, we are talking about the SWOT analysis. And of course, the ONT will be the opportunities and threat. And we are talking about the external environment. Now, let's talk about the external environment. Firstly, before we dip into the bits and pieces, we are talking about the opportunities and threat. But here, we would like to look at it from one of these three models' point of view. Now, if you would like to analyze your micro environment that you're operating in, which means micro environment is specific to your industry only, usually we use Porter's 5 forces analysis. Here, I would like to use the mnemonics for this. My own mnemonic is called CCCSS. I will detail that in a second, don't worry for that. And of course, after you look at what's happening within our industry, I will also need to look at, from a macro environment point of view, of any of the given factor changes, what will be the impact to our business. I would like to use another model called PESTEL analysis there. For example, if the economy is not good, I would say that economy sometimes be good, sometimes not good. It will be bouncing up or down. And of course, we are looking at the cycle of the economy. And what will be the strategies for any given businesses during each of the stages of the economic cycle? And we'll touch about that later on. And of course, finally, I will also need to look at the overseas issues, or sometimes that we are looking at whether or not we need to operate in this place. Why do we operate in this place? Why do we set up our shop here? It's better than others. Why? Why are we going to be setting up our company in that particular country, not elsewhere, that we've got competitive advantage over there? Why? So, in order to answer this question, I would like to use the Porter's diamond model in much more detail. And of course, firstly, we'll need to think about the factor condition in there. So, for example, whether or not there will be continuous innovation in that particular country. So if the answer for that is yes, possibly the demand is quite high, and therefore it's easier for our business to generate revenue in that particular country. And that's all we can do. But I will leave the external environment analysis in the next of our section onwards. Right there. Now, when talking about the strategy here, we are talking about the position audit. Now, let's think about the position audit just to check ourselves. Now, to audit our position. Of course, do you remember what should we do? Firstly, we'll need to do the SWOT analysis. And of course, this bit will be the internal parts within our business. We are talking about the competitive advantage. And this part is talking about the external environment. We will need to analyze the micro, macro, and even the overseas market decision later on. Besides, what we need to do is to think about another issue, particularly related to for example, the internal bit. So a lot of companies may simply raise their selling price. Well, you can certainly raise your selling price, but the simple idea, according to another model in the ACCA study, is what I mean by the strategy clock. Now, of course, according to this model, I can say that a particular conclusion, very valuable conclusion to our business, would be that you can certainly increase up your selling price. However, at the same time, you should at least maintain or to increase the value given to your customers. If you simply increase your selling price, not offering extra values to your customers, for example, here at Global APC, if you simply increase our selling price without increasing our pass rate or the quality of our materials, of course, we can't gain competitive advantage in the education field. Another things that we need to think about specifically related to the external environment is what I mean by the strategic drift. Now, strategic drift problem not only exists in larger businesses, so for example, Nokia, and even for many small businesses, because when strategic drift happens, the stage number one would not certainly be the strategic drift happens. The stage number one will certainly be that there might be little external environment changes. But we are not aware of it. So think about a particular, for example, the food shop that's selling daily food, for example, and selling some of the biscuits and bread. Right, so we have got customers living nearby to buy our food and bread. However, we're not aware that these customers are more caring about the gluten-free food. And that's why we continue to sell what we currently have until our strategy drift away, which means strategic drift. That will be a stage number two. Our sales revenue starts to drop, but we are not aware of this. At the stage number three, our shop may be in a floss, which means we're not sure what to do. We keep introducing something that is not related to our production line and product line at all. So for example, we start heavily selling salad, but customers not buying it. And finally, you will need to have the large change, and this is what I mean by the transformational change needed. Otherwise, I can't survive. Think about Nokia. That happened many years ago, that not aware that Apple emerged in the marketplace. Okay, so using a very smartphone system, but Nokia at that particular moment in time still using the Sabian system. Okay, strategic drift, still using that system to develop new product. However, the market share, yeah, I would say that using the word stolen by Apple company and Nokia company, not sure what to do, and undergoing the transformational change in the end. Now, strategic drift, very important. So this is why that to any given businesses, the knowledge management and even building a learning organization, and that will be very, very important key to any given businesses in that. And that's why when we are looking at the audit position here, which means the position audit, to audit our position using a SWOT analysis, we can further summarize into two main aspects. Firstly, you will need to do the scenario planning properly, and that's very, very important. You will need to plan what is going on in terms of the market, which means the customer base, in terms of your reputation, in terms of the legal side, where there might still be changes in laws and regulations, in terms of the physical side, and to consider, for example, whether or not your machineries will be up to date. Now, what we need to think about regarding the scenario planning in the exam is that the stage number one, you always to think about whether or not there will be opportunities that each of the area may go wrong, and this is what I mean by the risk assessment. And you will also need to think about if that risk happens, what will be the impact to our business, how much money do we will lose, and how much market share that may be stolen by somebody else. And you will need to think about the response, okay, that you develop in terms of these areas in turn. You need to come up with different scenarios and to assess their impact, what may go wrong. Of course, another thing to any given business is that they will need to think about the knowledge management. That's very, very important topic there. There's no point in knowing this without keeping this, or maybe stolen by your competitor. For example, I know how to teach. I know how to help you pass your SBL exam very, very easily. But if that technique is stolen by somebody else, you can easily see that over the internet. Of course, APC may be losing competitive advantage. So this is why, for the knowledge management, we'll need to think about, firstly, the technology that we can use. For example, we can have Portal to store our knowledge and videos, and we can also have the entrepreneurial resource planning system, which means the ERP system, to make sure that we've got the flow of management of all departments all together in one go, in real time. We'll also need to have a decision support system within our IT system, for example, and to make sure that we, for example, building the AI function in there. So using the stored data, the system can tell us what decisions to make. And finally, yes, we can also think about the expert system. For example, that we have our own library of knowledge, for example, for the ACCA. And of course, the expert system simply says that if you insert a question in there, and of course the system will tell you right away what will be the answer. You can refer to that. Of course, the big four accountancy firms usually use the expert system and to train the staff. Secondly, we'll need to think about the learning organisation. That's very, very important. Now, learning organisation would not necessarily be that we simply learn the knowledge without analysing the external environment. We'll need to analyse to assess the external environment continuously, which means that we'll need to monitor the response from our competitors, from government, from suppliers, customers, and so on. But at the same time, we'll need to have a mindset that we'll need to record knowledge. That's very important. We'll need to train our staff. That's very important. And even to use that knowledge to solve any problems that our business may see in real time. And that's how we do it. Very important indeed. Now, having said that, very important in strategy, we talk about the precision audit. Quite complicated, really. But now let's detail the corporate strategy before we move into any complicated models, for example, the PESTEL and process 5 forces and even value chains. Let's talk about the corporate strategy there in more detail. When talking about the corporate strategy, there will always be two issues that we need to discuss about in this exam. Firstly, is that how the headquarters or HQ can add value to our business. Of course, we can call our business as the strategic business unit or the SBU. So to the strategic business unit or the SBU. Now, what do I mean by SBU is that our business may be divided into different product lines. So each of the product line will certainly be our SBU. Of course, in answering this question, of course, we will have one of these three ways to add value to the SBU. I'll talk about that in a second. The next part within our corporate strategy will be to think about or to rethink that what we are currently having within our business. For example, here for Global APC, we've got different product lines. We teach ACCA, we teach CIMA, we also teach ICAW and other professional qualifications. Of course, you will need to think about whether or not to retain these product lines or to sell these product lines to others. Particularly, we are using the BCG matrix or the Boston Consulting Group matrix to do that. And of course, we'll divide all our product lines based on the relative market share and the market growth. And we'll see whether or not they're thin dog. We may be thinking about to dispose of them. We may be thinking about, okay, is that maybe a cash cow, we need to retain that. And of course, we'll detail that model in a second in subsequent recordings. But firstly, let's analyse how the headquarter or the board of directors can add value to the strategic business unit. Firstly, of course, there will be one of these three ways that they can add value to it. I always say to my students that if you're sitting the ACCA exam, studying this qualification, that some of you may be getting fund from your parent. How would your parent help with you? So if you're saying that your parents will simply give you funds, but not sure what you're currently doing, because your parents may be giving you option that you can sit the ACCA qualification. You can also go for other professional qualifications such as the CFA. Of course, they don't want to know the process. They only want the final outcome, whether or not you can get this, and whether or not you get the desired salary and your job. So if that's the case, then your parents may be acting as the portfolio manager, because they may be using the hands-off approach. To manage this type of businesses from a parent's point of view or from the headquarters point of view, we'll always think about the ROI, which means the return on investment metric or the performance measure, or you can call it as the KPI, to measure whether or not that SBU is doing a good job. On the other hand, if your parent will simply give you funds, but ask you, okay, you need to sit the ACCA qualification, and you can choose whatever tuition provider, for example, such as Global APC, to study this qualification. So if that's the case, then the parents or the headquarter will be acting as the synergy manager. Now, synergy manager would simply be that I will give you funds. You've got the level of freedom to choose how to realize that objective. And of course, because I give you fund, which means if you did not get my fund, you can't get the ACCA qualification, you can't go for it, which means that I give you fund, 1 + 1 will be equals to 5. And that's what I mean by the synergy manager. And of course, very importantly, when dealing with the synergy manager from the SBU's point of view, and even vice versa, we'll always think about the cultural differences. Because to a certain extent, you want me to do this, but what if I don't want to do that because I don't get that experience? So if that's the case, then things may fail. Finally, the headquarter may be acting as a parent indeed, which means the parental manager. So in other words, I give you money to go for ACCA qualification. I pay for your exam fee. But at the same time, I will teach you step by step of how to get that qualification, because I've got that experience, because I'm a fellow member of ACCA. Now, if that's the case, then the parental managers always to use the hands-on approach to teach and to help the business to grow. Okay, now I can't say that which role from a headquarters point of view would be better, but from the SBL exams point of view, you will need to spot from the case clue that how the headquarter can add value to the SBU, whether or not they're acting as the portfolio manager or the synergy manager, and even the parental manager. The synergy manager will simply be, I provide you with the resource and I give you that direction. You will need to do it. The parental manager saying that, no worries, I will teach you step by step. Portfolio manager will simply say, okay, I will give you a fund, you can do whatever you like, but you will need to give me the outcome. That's it. Now, so far, from my perspective, when talking about strategy, from this section, you may notice that strategy is never about the to-do list. You need to do it. You need to implement it. If something goes wrong, you will need to use the holistic approach to see whether or not you've got the competitive advantage, which means the final result. You can win your competitor. If this is not the case, you will need to adjust that strategy, because for any given businesses, they will need to be a learning organisation nowadays. We can't simply focus on the internal parts within our business. We'll also need to monitor the changes in the environment. And of course, when talking about the analysis there, which means the stage number 1 of our strategy, will certainly be the analysis to audit our position and to set up our corporate strategy. I hope the first section here helps. And of course, from the next section onwards, we will be discussing about some of the important models in more detail. See you soon. Bye-bye.
APC, accounting for your future.